My name is Emily Carter and I'm 29 years old. 4 years ago, my brother told my parents I failed my surgical boards. He lied. And that lie cost me every seat at every holiday table, every birthday phone call, every chance to be their daughter. They changed the locks, blocked my number, and told my grandmother I was in rehab. Then last month, my brother was airlifted into my trauma bay with a ruptured aorta. The doors swung open, and when my mother saw the name on my white coat, she grabbed my father's arm so hard she left fingerprints. My name is Dr. Emily Carter, and I am the chief of trauma surgery at St. Michael's Medical Center in Chicago. But for 4 years, my own parents didn't know that. They didn't know I finished my fellowship. They didn't know I led a team of 40 surgeons. They didn't know I existed. And now my brother is in my ICU, and they are in my waiting room, and the truth that my brother buried is about to surface in the most public way imaginable. But before I take you into that operating room, you need to understand the lie that erased me and the sister who held the match. Growing up in Chicago, there were two Carters in the house, but only one who made the rules. My brother Daniel is 4 years older. He was the quarterback, the homecoming king, the one my father taught to throw a spiral before I learned to tie my shoes. My dad, Frank Carter, worked construction his whole life. Thick hands, thicker pride. He valued two things, toughness and loyalty. Daniel gave him both in spades. I gave him straight A's and a stack of library books he never touched. I wasn't difficult, I wasn't rebellious. I was just invisible in a house that only had room for one star. My mother, Linda, tried. She'd pack my lunch with little notes, show up to my science fairs alone, sit in the back row and clap louder than anyone. But she was outnumbered. My father had already decided which child would carry his name forward. And it wasn't the girl who spent Saturday nights memorizing the Krebs cycle. Here's a small story that tells you everything. Sophomore year of high school, I qualified for the Illinois State Science Olympiad. Same weekend, Daniel had a regional championship game. My parents drove to his game. My mother dropped me at the bus for the Olympiad. I won bronze. Daniel fumbled twice and his team lost. That night at dinner, my father replayed every play of the loss in excruciating detail. He never asked about my medal. It sat on my dresser for 3 years. He never looked at it once. I told myself I didn't need his attention. I poured everything into my grades, my MCAT prep, my applications. I applied to 17 medical schools. I got into the University of Chicago Pritzker School of Medicine, full scholarship. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding the letter, my hands shaking. My father was at the table reading the sports section. I told him. He looked up, blinked, and said, "That's good, Emily. Daniel just got promoted at the warehouse." That was it. But my mother, she cried, real tears. She called her sister my Aunt Carol. She told the neighbors. For one brief stretch, I was the daughter who mattered. And that was the moment my brother started paying attention. Daniel had never felt threatened by me. I was the quiet one, the bookish one, the one who didn't compete for the spotlight he occupied by birthright. But when my acceptance letter went out, when my mother started talking about her daughter, the doctor, something shifted in him. He started showing up to family dinners with questions. How's school? Who's your advisor? What rotations are you doing? I thought he was finally taking an interest. I was handing him the blueprint to my destruction. First year of medical school was brutal. Anatomy, biochemistry, physiology, I was drowning in information and sleep deprivation. I called home one night exhausted, crying. My mother's first words, "Daniel's having a rough time at work. Can you call back tomorrow?" I hung up, sat on the floor of my dorm room, and realized I was alone. That's when I met Chloe Nguyen, a second-year resident in emergency medicine. She was my teaching assistant for clinical skills. She saw something in me, a fire buried under exhaustion. She took me aside after a bad simulation and said, "You're going to be a great doctor, but you need to stop looking for approval from people who don't know how to give it." She became my anchor. Third year, surgery rotation, I found my calling. The OR was the only place where everything made sense. Scalpel in hand, anatomy exposed, every movement deliberate. My attending, Dr. Patricia Holloway, the vice chair of surgery, told me I had the hands and the nerve. She offered me a research position. I was on track for a top residency placement. Then my grandfather got sick, pancreatic cancer. My mother called, frantic. I took a formal leave of absence from medical school, caregiver status, paperwork filed, spot held. I flew to Chicago and spent 3 months at his bedside. I called Daniel to explain. I made the mistake of trusting him. His voice was warm. "Take all the time you need, Em. I'll handle mom and dad." 11 days later, he told them I had dropped out, that I was partying, that I had failed my boards and was hiding it. He showed them a fake email he'd created. My father didn't question it. My mother, crying, asked him if he was sure. "I have proof," he said. He had nothing but his word. It was enough. The call came at midnight. My father's voice was ice. "Your brother told us everything. You're done. Don't call this house again." I tried to explain. He hung up. I called back, blocked. I sent emails with my leave of absence paperwork attached. No response. I mailed a letter. It came back unopened. My mother's handwriting on the envelope. I called my Aunt Carol. She called my father. He told her to stay out of it. I stopped calling after a week, not because I gave up, because I finally understood that they had chosen a long time ago. Daniel just gave them permission to stop pretending. My grandfather died 3 weeks later. I wasn't at the funeral. I wasn't invited. I went back to medical school, no family, no support. I worked nights at a clinic, took extra loans, lived on ramen and coffee. I matched into general surgery at Northwestern, 5 years of residency, 12-hour shifts, weekends in the OR. I didn't break. I became chief resident. I published 4 papers. I met James, a physical therapist at the hospital, steady and kind, the first man who saw my scars and didn't flinch. We got married in a civil ceremony. 2 witnesses. Aunt Carol came. My mother sent a card but didn't sign it. Daniel sent nothing. I became chief of trauma surgery at St. Michael's at 32, the youngest in the hospital's history. My office has a window overlooking the helipad. My name is on the door, Dr. Emily Carter, FACS Chief of Trauma. I thought I had built a wall high enough that nothing from my past could climb over it. I was wrong. Last Tuesday, I was paged at 3 in the morning. Level 1 trauma, male, 33 MVC, blunt chest trauma, aortic transection suspected, ETA 10 minutes. I scrubbed in, prepped the team, pulled up the incoming patient chart. Patient name Daniel Carter, emergency contact Frank and Linda Carter. I stood in the hallway for 5 seconds, the overhead lights hummed. The trauma bay doors swung open and I heard my mother's voice before I saw her face. That's my son. Where is the doctor? Where is the chief? I didn't move, I couldn't. The charge nurse touched my arm. Dr. Carter, they're asking for you. I looked at her. I looked at the name on the chart. Then I walked toward the doors that had just closed behind my brother's stretcher, knowing that on the other side of those doors, my parents were about to meet the daughter they had erased. The trauma bay doors swung open and I stepped through. The overhead lights were surgical white, unforgiving. Daniel lay on the table, intubated, chest rising and falling mechanically, blood pressure 50 over palpable. My team was already in position. Dr. Marcus Chen on my left, Dr. Priya Singh on my right, nurses at every corner. I didn't hesitate. Open chest, I need a clamshell. The scalpel was in my hand before I finished the sentence. I made the incision from mid-axillary line to mid-axillary line, cutting through skin and muscle, exposing the chest cavity. The aortic injury was worse than the CT suggested. A complete transection just distal to the left subclavian artery. Blood was pooling faster than we could suction. Clamp proximal control now. My hands moved automatically. I had done this procedure 17 times as chief. But this time, the face under the endotracheal tube was the same face that had smiled at me from across the dinner table, the same voice that had told my parents I was a failure. I pushed the memory down. The patient on my table was a trauma victim, nothing more. 4 hours and 20 minutes later, I placed the final suture. The graft was in place. Daniel's vitals were stable. He would live. I stepped back, peeled off my gloves, and stared at my hands. They were steady. They always were. That's what training does. It separates the person from the surgeon. But in the moment of silence after the case, the person comes back. I walked into the scrub room and looked at myself in the mirror. Same face, same badge, same name, but everything had changed. I had just saved the life of the man who had destroyed mine, and the people who had believed him were sitting 40 feet away, waiting for news about their son. Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway. Dr. Carter, the family is asking for an update. I'll handle it. I walked down the hallway, the linoleum tiles stretched ahead like a runway. My footsteps echoed. I could see them through the glass partition of the surgical waiting room. My father packing, my mother seated, hands clasped, lips moving in a silent prayer. They looked older. My father's hair was gray now, thin on top. My mother's face had deep lines I didn't remember. I pushed through the double doors. The room went quiet. My mother looked up, her eyes met mine. For a full 3 seconds, she didn't recognize me, then her face crumpled. Emily. Yes, Mom, it's me. My father stopped packing. He stared at me at my surgical scrubs, at the badge clipped to my chest. I watched him process it. The name, the title, the realization. You're the chief. I am. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. For the first time in my memory, my father had no words. I delivered the clinical update. Daniel sustained a traumatic aortic transection from the impact. We performed a graft repair. He's stable and will be moved to the ICU shortly. He's going to make a full recovery. My mother sobbed, "Thank you, Emily, oh my God, thank you." But my father's eyes were narrowing, the shock was wearing off and the old machinery was starting to turn. You're a surgeon. I'm the chief of trauma, Dad, I have been for 2 years. How? He said it like an accusation. How did you become chief? Daniel said you dropped out, he said you were in rehab. I never dropped out, I never went to rehab. I took a leave of absence to care for Grandpa. Daniel lied. He told you I failed, he showed you a fake email. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Irene, I mean Emily, I didn't know, we didn't know. You didn't want to know, I sent letters, I sent emails, you sent them back unopened. The silence was thick. A nurse appeared behind me. Dr. Carter, the ICU is ready for transfer. I turned back to my parents. You can see him in an hour, but I need to finish my notes. I walked out, my mother called after me, Emily, wait, please. I stopped but didn't turn around. I'm not going anywhere, Mom. I work here, but I'm not going to pretend this is easy. I went to my office, closed the door, and sat down. My hands were shaking now. The adrenaline was wearing off. I stared at the wall for 10 minutes, then my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Emily, it's Aunt Carol. I need to tell you something about Daniel, something I should have told you years ago. I called her immediately. Her voice was tight, trembling. I have proof. I have screenshots of texts Daniel sent to a friend. He admitted he lied about you. He said he couldn't stand that Mom and Dad were proud of you. He said he had to take you down before you became more important than him. I leaned back in my chair. How long have you had this? Since 6 months after he told the lie. I didn't show your parents because I was afraid of tearing the family apart, but I've been sitting on it and I can't anymore. I'm sending it to you now. The screenshots arrived. I read them, 7 messages, each one damning. In one, Daniel wrote, I'll never let her be the golden child. She thinks she's better than me. I'll show them she's nothing. I closed my phone. The weight of it settled in my chest. My brother hadn't just lied, he had planned it. He had executed it with precision, and my parents had believed him because it was easier than questioning the son they had built their world around. I walked to the ICU. Daniel was awake, groggy, still intubated but conscious. His eyes found me. I saw recognition, then fear. I leaned over the bed rail. You're going to be fine, Daniel. Your heart will heal, but the damage you did to this family, that's going to take a lot longer. I pulled out my phone and held up the screenshots. His eyes widened, the heart monitor spiked. These are texts you sent to Matt Harrison. You admitted everything, I have them, and I'm going to show Mom and Dad. He tried to speak, but the tube silenced him. His hand reached for me. I stepped back. You took 4 years of my life, you took my family, you took my grandfather's funeral, and you did it because you were scared of being second. That is going to follow you for the rest of your life. I put my phone away and walked to the waiting room. My parents were still there, sitting in the same chairs, holding each other's hands. Mom, Dad, I need to show you something. I handed them my phone. They read the screenshots in silence. My mother's face crumbled. My father's turned to stone. Is this real? He whispered. It's real, Dad. Your son destroyed our family because he couldn't stand being outshined. And you let him. You never once called me. You never once asked for my side. You just erased me. I took my phone back. I'm not going to cut you out, but I'm not going to pretend this is fixable with words. You want to be part of my life? You start by accepting the truth, all of it. My mother broke down. My father stared at the floor. The overhead lights hummed. Daniel will be discharged in a week. I suggest you use that time to decide what kind of family you want to be, because I'm done being the one who disappears. I turned and walked away. My footsteps echoed down the hallway. Behind me, I heard my father's voice, cracked and broken, saying something I never thought I would hear. Emily, I was wrong. I kept walking. I had waited 30 years to hear those words, and now that they had come, I didn't know what to do with them. But I knew one thing for certain. My brother's lie had been built brick by brick, and the truth was going to tear it down the same way, one brick at a time. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. James called 3 times. I sent a text saying I was fine but needed space. I sat in my office with the lights off, watching the helipad glow through the window. My phone buzzed again. Aunt Carol. Emily, I'm sending you something else. I found it in your mother's email. Daniel sent a letter to the hospital board 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I opened the attachment. A formal complaint typed, signed with my brother's name. He claimed I had falsified my credentials, that I had never completed my surgical residency, that the hospital should investigate me for fraud. He had sent it to the entire board of directors, copied HR, the medical director, and the CEO. I scrolled to the bottom, a note from the CEO. After review, Dr. Carter's credentials have been verified in full. This complaint is without merit, no further action required. They had investigated me, and I never knew. Daniel had tried to destroy my career before I even knew he was still hunting me. I drove home at 4 in the morning. James was asleep on the couch, waiting. I woke him up and told him everything. He listened, held me, and said, "We're going to get through this, but you need to decide what you want. Do you want revenge or do you want healing?" I didn't know yet. The next morning, I walked into the ICU. Daniel was extubated, sitting up, pale and groggy. My parents were in the corner, silent. The screenshots had done their work. The atmosphere was a funeral for something that hadn't quite died yet. Daniel saw me and flinched. Emily, I'm sorry. You already said that, but sorry doesn't cover the letter you sent to the hospital board trying to get me fired. My mother gasped. My father's head snapped up. What letter? I pulled out my phone and read it aloud, every word. When I finished, the room was silent except for the beep of the heart monitor. Is that true? My father whispered to Daniel. Daniel closed his eyes. Yes. My father walked out, not angry, broken. The kind of silence that fills a room when the person who always had the loudest voice suddenly has nothing left to say. Over the next 3 days, the story spread. Aunt Carol had sent the screenshots to the family group chat. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years started calling. Some apologized, some wanted details. One uncle, my father's brother, called to say he always knew Daniel was a liar, he had just never had proof. Then the hospital's public relations director called me into a meeting. A local news reporter had gotten wind of the story. The headline they were running, "Top Trauma Surgeon Saves Brother Who Tried to Destroy Her Career." The hospital wanted me to issue a statement. I refused. I'm not hiding, but I'm not performing either. If the story comes out, it comes out. I'll deal with it. It came out that evening. The article was fair, factual, and devastating. It quoted the texts, the letter to the board, the 4 years of estrangement. By morning, it had been shared 12,000 times. My phone exploded, but something unexpected happened. The comments were not pity, they were outrage, not at me, at Daniel, at my parents. Strangers were angrier than I had ever let myself be. I sat on my kitchen floor reading them, and for the first time in 4 years, I felt seen. Daniel was discharged on a Thursday. I didn't go to see him leave, but my mother called that night, crying. "Emily, your father is going to group therapy. He found a program for parents of estranged children. He's going every Tuesday. He's reading books. He's trying." And Daniel, "He's moving out. We can't look at him the same way. I know he's our son, but I don't know who he is anymore." I didn't gloat. I didn't feel satisfied. I felt empty, because the truth I had waited for had arrived and all it left behind was rubble. Then came the email that changed everything, not from my family, from the chief medical officer. "Dr. Carter, the hospital board has unanimously voted to nominate you for the State Physician of the Year award. We would like to submit your story with your permission as part of the nomination." I stared at the screen, the brother who tried to bury me, the parents who erased me, the career I built alone. And now the institution where I saved his life wanted to honor me, not despite the story, because of it. I typed back one word, yes. The award ceremony was 3 weeks away, and in those 3 weeks, the scaffolding of my brother's lie crumbled completely. Every family member who had heard the rehab story received a correction email from my mother. Every cousin heard the truth. My grandmother, 87 years old, called me and said, "I never believed him, not for a second." But the most important conversation came the night before the ceremony. My father showed up at my door, alone. He stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I remembered. "Can I come in?" We sat at the kitchen table. James made coffee and disappeared. My father stared at his cup for a long time. "I don't know how to fix this, Emily. I don't know if it can be fixed, but I want to try." "Trying is not a one-time thing, Dad. It's a daily thing. You have to show up, consistently, even when it's hard. I know I'm in therapy, I'm reading, I'm listening, but I also need you to know something. The day you got into medical school, I was proud of you. I just didn't know how to say it." "Then say it now." He looked at me, eyes wet. "I'm proud of you, Emily. I always have been. I was just too weak to show it." I reached across the table and took his hand. It was the first time we had touched in 4 years. "It's a start, Dad, but it's going to take a lot more starts before we get to the middle." The morning of the award ceremony, I stood in front of my mirror. Black dress, simple, no jewelry. James straightened my collar and kissed my forehead. "You ready?" "No, but I'm going anyway." The ballroom was full, 200 people, surgeons, administrators, the hospital board, and in the back row, 3 seats that Aunt Carol had arranged. My mother in a blue dress I had never seen, my father in a tie he clearly hated, and next to them empty. Daniel had not been invited. I walked to the podium, the award was announced. The applause was warm, genuine. I looked at the audience, I looked at my parents, and then I spoke. "I want to tell you what this award really means. It means you can be erased by the people who should love you most and still become the person you were meant to be. It means the truth does not expire. It waits, it grows, and when you finally speak it, it will find the light." I looked at my mother, she was crying. "I don't have a perfect ending for you tonight. My family is still healing. Some wounds take longer than others, but I am here, I am whole, and I am finally ready to let the people who hurt me try again." I stepped back from the podium, the applause swelled, but the moment that mattered most came after. My mother and father walked to the front of the ballroom, arms around each other, faces wet. My mother hugged me and whispered, "We are so sorry, we are so, so sorry." And my father, for the second time in his life, said the 3 words I never thought I would hear from him. "I love you." I didn't say it back, not yet, but I nodded. And that nod, small as it was the crack in the wall. The truth had done what lies never could, it had opened a door, and I was the one who decided who walked through. The weeks that followed the award ceremony moved in slow motion. My parents continued their therapy. My father attended every session, read every book my therapist recommended, and called me every Sunday at exactly 10 in the morning. The calls were awkward at first, stilted silence, forced questions about my week, but they became less painful over time. My mother started sending care packages. Cookies, handwritten notes, a sweater she had knitted. I accepted them without comment. I was learning to let small kindnesses land. Daniel disappeared. He had moved out of my parents' house the day after the article came out. I heard through Aunt Carol that he was living in a studio apartment in the suburbs, working a warehouse job, attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. He had stopped drinking, he had stopped fighting, he had become a ghost of the brother I remembered. Then 6 weeks after the accident, I received a letter, handwritten, mailed to the hospital, no return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. I opened it in my office alone. Emily, I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I'm writing to tell you the truth, the whole truth, even the parts you don't know. The accident wasn't an accident. I drove through that red light on purpose. I stopped reading, my hands were shaking. I read the sentence again, then I continued. I had been drinking for months. I couldn't live with what I did to you. Every time I saw mom and dad's faces, every holiday we pretended you didn't exist, I felt like I was drowning. I wanted to end it. I wanted to end me, but I didn't die. You saved me. The person I tried to destroy saved my life, and now I have to live with that every single day. I'm in treatment, I'm working, I'm trying to become someone who deserves to be your brother. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I wanted you to know the truth. I owe you that much, Daniel. I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer next to the screenshots, next to the award plaque. I sat in silence for a long time, a suicide attempt. My brother had tried to kill himself and I had sewn him back together. It was the most complicated truth I had ever held. I told James that night. He held me and said nothing. There was nothing to say. The next week, I called my therapist and doubled my sessions. I needed to process the weight of what I now carried. She asked me one question that I couldn't answer. If Daniel asked to meet you, would you say yes? I didn't know. 2 months passed, I threw myself into work. 30 cases, 12 trauma activations, a quality improvement initiative that reduced OR turnover time by 18%. The hospital newsletter ran a profile on me titled The Surgeon Who Forged Her Own Path. I had become a symbol of resilience. Inside, I was still unpacking the letter. Then on a Tuesday evening in April, my mother called. Her voice was different, cautious. Emily, Daniel wants to see you. He's been asking for weeks. He's too scared to ask himself. He asked me to call. I told him I would, but I would not pressure you. I looked at the calendar. The cherry blossoms outside my window were blooming. It had been almost exactly a year since the accident, a year since my brother's lie began its final collapse. Set it up, neutral ground, not the hospital, not his place, a coffee shop. Saturday morning, 10 o'clock, a coffee shop in Evanston, halfway between our worlds. I arrived early, ordered black coffee, sat at a table facing the door. He walked in at 5 after 10. He looked different, thinner, clean-shaven, eyes clear. He wore a plain button-down shirt untucked. He saw me and stopped for a second, then walked over and sat down. He didn't reach for the coffee. He folded his hands on the table and looked at me. Thank you for coming. I read your letter, the whole thing. Did you tell mom and dad? No, that's not my story to tell, but you should. I know I will, I'm just not ready yet. We sat in silence for a full minute. The espresso machine hissed. Someone laughed at the counter. Emily, I don't have a speech. I don't have an excuse. I was jealous. I was broken. I was a coward. I took the easiest target, which was you, and I ruined everything. There's no apology big enough for that. There isn't. He nodded. I know, but I'm not here to ask you to forgive me. I'm here to ask you to let me try to be different, to earn a place in your life, even if it's a small one, even if it takes years. I looked at him, the brother who had tried to erase me, the brother I had pulled back from death, the brother who had written a confession in a letter that I still kept in my desk. I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no, I'm saying I'll watch. I'll see what you do, not what you say, what you do for a long time. And if you prove yourself consistent, I might let you in a little, but the door is mine now. You don't get to decide when it opens. He nodded slowly. I can live with that. He stood to leave, then paused. Emily, I'm proud of you. I should have said it years ago, but I'm proud of you. He walked out. I sat alone for another 20 minutes staring at my cold coffee. Then I drove home. The next day, I called my parents and told them about the letter. The part about the accident being intentional. My mother wept. My father was silent for a long time, then said, "We failed, both of you. We created a family where one child had to destroy the other to feel seen, and that starts and ends with us." It was the most honest thing he had ever said. I started bringing my parents into my life slowly. Sunday dinners, a walk in the park. They met James properly, not as a stranger, but as my husband. My mother cried when she saw our wedding photo on the mantle. My father asked James about his work, his family, his hobbies, real questions, real listening. It was not a movie, there was no montage of perfect reunions, there were setbacks. My father fell back into old patterns of silence during a disagreement about politics. My mother overstepped by trying to give me unsolicited advice about my cases. I reminded them of boundaries, they apologized, we kept moving. The final surprising detail came 3 months later. A package arrived at my office, no return address. Inside, a framed photograph and a letter. The photograph was of my grandfather, taken a year before he died. He was sitting in his armchair holding a copy of my medical school acceptance letter. On the back, in his handwriting, "For Emily, the first doctor in our family I always knew you would be." The letter was from my grandmother. She had found the photo in an old album and wanted me to have it. "I showed this to your father last week," she wrote. "He cried for an hour. He said he never told your grandfather how proud he was of you. He said it was his greatest regret. I'm telling you this because I think you should know. Your father's silence was never about you. It was about his own inadequacy. He is learning slowly how to be the father you deserved. And I think in his own way, he is becoming one." I hung the photograph in my office next to my diplomas. Every time I look at it, I remember that the truth does not expire. It finds its way home. And when it does, you get to choose what comes next. A few weeks later, I walked into the trauma bay for a routine case. A young woman mid-20s with a collapsed lung from a car accident, standard tube thoracostomy. But as I was prepping her, she looked at my badge and said, "Dr. Carter, are you the one from the article?" "I am." She started crying. "I read your story. It helped me cut off my toxic family. I moved across the country. I started over. I just want to thank you." I finished the procedure, wrote the orders, and sat down in the break room, and I realized something. My story was no longer just mine. It belonged to every person who had been erased, dismissed, or silenced by the people who should have loved them best. The lie my brother told had tried to bury me, but the truth had built a bridge, and now other people were walking across it. I drove home that evening to the smell of James cooking dinner. Ipo, our golden retriever, greeted me at the door. My mother had left a message on the answering machine. "Just checking in, love you." I sat down at the table, 4 plates, 4 chairs, 2 empty, but the door was open. And I was the one who decided who walked through. I don't have a perfect answer for what comes next. The truth is, family healing is not a destination, it is a daily practice. Some days my father's call comes at 10 in the morning and we talk for an hour about nothing. Other days, the silence between us still feels like an old wound that hasn't fully closed. My mother sends me articles about boundary setting now, which is progress I never expected. And Daniel, he is still in treatment. He calls once a month. I listen. I don't promise anything beyond listening. That is all I can give right now. The question I get asked most often is, how did you survive being erased? The answer is not dramatic. I survived because I refused to let their version of me become my identity. I survived because I found people who saw me clearly: Chloe, James, Aunt Carol, the nurses who watched me operate. I survived because I kept moving, even when every step felt like walking through concrete. And I survived because I learned that the truth does not need to be loud, it just needs to be patient. If you're watching this and you are in the middle of your own estrangement, your own silence, your own waiting, I want you to hear this. You are not defined by the people who failed to see you. You are defined by what you build in the space they left behind. The door you control is the most powerful thing you will ever own. Guard it, but don't lock it forever. Leave a crack, let the light in on your terms. The name on my badge says Dr. Emily Carter, Chief of Trauma Surgery, but the name I carry underneath is the one I gave myself. Not the daughter who was erased, not the sister who was betrayed. The woman who rebuilt herself from the ground up with steady hands and a patient heart. If this story meant something to you, if it made you think about your own family or your own boundaries, let me know in the comments. What would you have done? Would you have opened that door? And if you want to hear more stories about people who refuse to be erased, hit subscribe. The next story might be the one you need to hear. Thank you for being here. I'll see you next time.